Some would say that you are betraying the brotherhood with this film. What do you say, Byron?
I think that my film is an act of leadership. I think that this film demonstrates leadership and a love for my fraternity and all of the Divine Nine organizations, and for anyone who goes through a process in which they have been harmed by hazing rituals. That is my response to that. You know, Karen, I've had the great fortune of getting to know family members who have been deeply impacted by hazing culture. And I say I had the great fortune of meeting them because I've really been transformed by their life stories and the pain and the grief that they've had to experience by losing their loved ones because of hazing rituals. I would say to anyone who has a problem or has issues with me telling my story in this film or addressing the issue of hazing, to spend some time with a family member who has lost their loved one. Spend some real time with them, talk to them, talk to somebody who was permanently scarred or injured as a result of hazing, right? Who has been emotionally or mentally traumatized because of, extreme hazing rituals. That's what I would say to them.
Byron, you pledged undergrad? You pledged undergrad? Okay. At Northeastern, that is in Boston. We were just talking about how complicated Boston's a complicated city. It is a complicated
city.
It's a complicated city.
Yes.
I mean, but it is because of Black folk that it is also really dope. So I'll just say that, yeah, y'all can at me. Boston. I love the city. Hate the racism, but that's not the total sum of what it is. But you pledged, and you are proud, like you're proud to be a Q.
I am.
So where does so you experience hazing as an undergrad, and you feel that the brotherhood can still be dope without doing all these other things, and by and large, it's illegal. So any hazing that's going on right now is being done not legally.
Karen, that's not just my opinion. That's also the stated mission and the values of our organization, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I mean, we're an anti-hazing organization. So this film is in alignment with the mission and the ethics of our fraternity, right? And most Divine Nine organizations and most Greek letter organizations have anti-hazing policies. So this film serves the interest of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. This is not acting against the interests of the organization. So I just want to just share, what led me to make the film in the first place, if you don't mind.
No, we were going to get there, but go ahead, please.
I was on my way to a speaking date, probably a screening to show another one of my films. And I opened the New York Times and I saw this story about a young man named George Daydoon, who was a young Black man who was a member of a white fraternity, not a Black fraternity. And it was a really tragic story about George and his mom, who was a Haitian-born woman who worked really hard to raise her son and to provide the best opportunity for him to get a great college education. He went to Cornell University. George was Marie Andre, his mother's only child, and she lost him to this really unnecessary and preventable hazing ritual. I'm not going to lie to you.
What they do to him?
He was forced to consume alcohol above and beyond the limit, and he died from alcohol poisoning. And they left his body down at the bottom of the basement of the fraternity house where he died. And his mother was devastated about this, right? And she still is. Marie Andre, his mom, is one of the participants in the film who I've gotten to know over the years while working on this film. And that was one of the stories that really motivated me, that really inspired me to make this film. And the story that really put me over the top was a story of a young man named Robert Champion, who was a band member at Florida A&M University. And he died as a result of being beaten to death by his bandmates. And that was another story that just made me say, something has to be done about this. This is ridiculous. These are people's children, who are being sent to college and they die. because of, hazing rituals and traditions that people just won't let go of, right? And so I wanted to make a film that was going to examine hazing culture. And in order for me to do that, I had to take a very honest look at the culture, and I had to talk to the people who would help me to get underneath the culture of hazing.
We're talking with Byron Hurt. You can follow him at Byron Hurt on Twitter. He's the director of Hazing. Is this connected to you? You've done 5 other films. One is I Am a Man, Black Masculinity in America. And I think about where we are right now in terms of our relationships with one another. I'm talking particularly about Black people, Black men and Black women, and this notion of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And there's some tension and some interesting machinations going on. I think a lot of it's from the outside, but a lot of it is also indoctrinated self-hatred that we carry forward with us into our relationships. This notion of I have to be a man to be strong, and I'm gotta beat you gotta be tough. You gotta be tough in order to be a man. How much of that is connected to this notion of hazing?
There is without question a connection between hazing culture and the culture of masculinity, the ways in which boys and men, and I'm not talking about Black men exclusively, I'm talking about men in general, okay? Because this is not just a Black male thing. There's no question that there's a direct connection between the ways in which boys and men learn and understand what it means to be a man and manly in our society, and the culture of hazing. There's no question about it. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, boys and men suffer from hazing deaths more at a higher rate than do girls and women. And that's whether it's a Greek letter organization or not. And so there is a real through line, between boys and men and masculinity and hazing culture. And that's another thing that I want to unpack in this film. I have spent a good deal of my adult life, working with, educating boys and men, talking about issues around manhood, masculinity, violence, sexual violence, just how to redefine manhood and masculinity. And this film, I think, is in alignment with my previous work. And I hope that people will give the film a chance and watch the film in its entirety, and see the stories and see how, the film unfolds before they make any judgments about the film.
And y'all can do that on next Monday, the Monday after next, September 12th, 10 p.m. Eastern on PBS, which we all have. And you can go to the website, pbs.org as well. And the film is called Hazing. I wanted to talk with you about this notion of what it means to be a man, Byron, because, again, the Qs will argue that they are the most masculine of all of the fraternities. I'm not going to get into that debate here, but I do think definition of what it means to be a man, especially when we're in a space where gender fluidity and the labels of what it is to be a man or a woman have kind of been like shifted and changed. Is it a personal definition, or is there a universal definition?
Well, let me just go back a little bit and say that, when I was a younger man, right, and I sought out Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, it was for a couple of different reasons. One, it was because my uncle, James Hogan Jr., was an Omega man, and he was an incredible Omega man. He was an upstanding Omega man. He was a scientist. He was well educated. He was my model of what a true Omega man was supposed to be. But he was also a tough man. He was a hard-nosed man. He was somebody who, I would consider to be a man's man, an A-type personality. And so I wanted to test my mettle, by seeking to join the same organization that my uncle, pledged and successfully entered or was initiated into. And so the part of that was me as a young man, in my, late teens, really trying to test my mettle as a man to see if I can make it through a very difficult, very arduous process. So yes, there is definitely a connection or an identification with manhood and whether or not you have the ability to survive, a very difficult process, the kind of process that I went through in the 1990. But, it should be said that process is no longer the same. The process that I went through in 1990 is no longer, an acceptable process. But I think people still want that measure of respect and credibility by other men. They want their manhood and masculinity to be affirmed by other men, right? They want to get the same kind of respect that the men who came before them have, and they don't want to be seen as less than or weak. And we're talking specifically about, boys and men who seek to belong to organizations. But I would say that, most people want that same level of respect and credibility. And so it's why they accept things during whatever process they go through that they normally may not accept in any other circumstance, because they value being in that organization and being a respected member in that organization more so than they are willing to walk away from a process that may demean them or humiliate them or degrade them, even if they choose to participate.
As there are a lot of people listening, raising children, is it time for us to kind of, like, as you're talking, I'm thinking what's missing is a rite of passage. There are other cultures that have rites of passage into adulthood, right? That requires, a study of language and an understanding of self and history. And, maybe if we go back, 2000 years, that required a sort of isolation. I've had many conversations with Dr. Gray Carr about, how even the twerking that we see today was a form of discipline for the young boys in the village. Like if you could watch this and control yourself, then that also was a sign of manhood. Like there's a lot of these things that we've lost, but we've taken bits and pieces and have made them into something really bad or not healthy. Is there room or need for a rite of passage?
Yeah, I value healthy rites of passage programs. I'm not anti, rite of passage programs for anyone. Because I think, ultimately, I think that we all have to develop certain skill sets, and we have to have the ability to endure and, persevere through challenging, processes or situations or circumstances in order to become, a fully, independent and strong, capable person. So I'm not against that. What this film is examining, what Hazing is examining, is when it goes far beyond the rite of passage program or a healthy process, where you may be seeking membership to become to become a member of a group, to the point where it gets abusive, right, and humiliating and degrading. That's the dividing line, and that's what needs to be done away with, in my opinion. But I will say that I'm not here to prescribe what that looks like. I think that, people have to determine what that looks like, and they have to be creative about how they're going to adapt new rituals and how they're going to, create that same sense of value in their membership, and value in whatever selection process they have, so that people still feel like they are worthy members, and everyone is looking at them like they have a measure of respect in that group. But I think that can be done without, abuse.
I agree. Hazing is the film. Byron Hurt is the filmmaker. In your line, as you went over, was there something that you would have done differently, or maybe regret happened in your process?
Well, I look at it this way. Had I not gone through the process that I went through, I would not have been able to make this film in the way that I've made this film. That process has helped me form my identity, right? And it has helped me to understand the process in a way that I could tell this story in a way that most filmmakers probably could not. right? Had they not gone through that experience. I've grown a lot. I've transformed a lot. I have evolved a lot since the time I pledged my organization, right? And I think that, I've learned a lot about violence prevention. I've learned a lot about the culture of masculinity, and so would I go through that same exact process again, knowing everything that I know now? Probably not, because I would not want anyone to violate my person, my body, the way that that took place in 1990, right? But that's why I'm making this film, because I think it's really important for people to see models, examples of people who are willing to challenge hazing culture, right? To kind of put themselves at personal risk to stand up against the dominant culture, or what sounds like or what feels like the dominant culture, people with very loud voices who are, trying to keep things the same way, even though the world is changing, the culture is changing, Greek life is changing, right? And are no longer condoning these really dangerous rituals, right? And experiences. And so what this film does is it shares the stories of individuals who were deeply impacted, but it also serves to give people permission to talk about their experiences, because, this is a very, very taboo subject. People don't want to talk about it. There's a code, right, where people know not to talk about this issue publicly. And what happens when you talk about it publicly is that you get ostracized. People call you names. People try and keep you inside of that box so that you don't speak out. But really, they're also sending messages to other people to stay inside that box. They're sending the message to other people that if you speak out about this is what you're going to be called, right? And so what I'm hoping that this film does is that it creates space and permission for people who feel uncomfortable about hazing culture, but don't really have the courage to speak up, to finally speak up.
Thank you for doing this. And I think you're right. When we talk, just because you survived trauma doesn't mean you should want the next person to experience the trauma that you went through. And it doesn't make them tough or weak to not want to be abused or to go through a trauma. It makes them healthy, actually. No one should seek that. So thank you, Byron, for doing this film.